This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, JZ Microphones, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, and Isotope. You're hearing my voice right now on a JZ pop filter and BB29 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and Isotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
The best advice, I think, for anybody is that if you have a plan and if you have a goal and an outcome in mind, is never let go of that. No matter what stage of life you're at, doesn't matter what age you are, it is really important to never let go of it, because it is possible. Anything is possible when you get your mind to it. And if you have a plan, somebody else is not going to make a plan for you, because plenty of people will make plans for you if you don't stick to your own.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. If you're ready to discover the secrets to making your mixes sound great no matter what your studio situation, then check out my free mixing course, mixmasterbundle.com, where I show you how to get great sounding mixes in your studio using simple techniques and free plugins. And when you're ready for more advanced studio skills, then check out recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, where you can learn from Grammy-winning teachers to help you record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever. Use the code Rockstar right now at checkout for 10% off any course for a limited time. No matter where you like to rock in the galaxy, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron lets you record with confidence over USB-C with up to more than a gigabyte per second real-world performance. Transfer tracks in seconds and take your sessions with you wherever you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof. Find the new OWC Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at maxsales.com/rockstars. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Stephen Kelly, a songwriter, producer, and mixing engineer from Dublin, Ireland. His mission is to help musicians and engineers create stream-worthy music without spending a fortune on gear. He's produced and mixed music for independent and major label artists, as well as producing award-winning audio for animated series, Fortune 500 companies, and AAA games. His career started out in Dublin, where he got his break writing music for TV ads. He then landed a role as a full-time engineer and sound designer with one of the top post-production studios in the country. From there, he moved to London to continue his career, and during the time in London, he became an award-nominated sound designer, helping to produce the voice of Walgreens, contributed to the AAA games projects, and continued to also make music. You can learn more about what Stephen is doing with his website to help you with your audio in your studio through understandingaudio.com. That's his website that basically just endeavors to teach you how to record in the studio. So great stuff. Thank you so much also to Kirk Teachout for making our introduction. Kirk has been a previous podcast on guest a couple of years ago, I think, at this point. And you can catch Kirk's podcast episode, 4 Steps to 1.4 million Spotify plays in a year, on RSR320. And then also a shout out to our mutual friend, Pete Woj, who actually introduced us all at the start of this thing. Pete has a channel called Mix Better Now, and he's one of the first folks I met in this space. So please welcome Stephen Kelly to Recording Studio Rockstars. Stephen, are you ready to rock, dude?
I'm ready to rock, Lid.
Dude, very cool to be chatting with Dublin. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man.
I mean, after all, I'm pretty sure the biggest band in the world comes from your part of the woods, at least. Isn't that about right?
You talking about the Cores, yeah?
The Cars, yeah, exactly.
You talking about, yeah, they are. They're a bit quiet at the moment, but hopefully there'll be some new music from them soon.
Yeah, you too, of course. I saw those guys at the Bonnaroo Festival here in Nashville one year.
Wow.
And I was really struck by it. I've never been like a super U2 fan, or let's say I was slow to come around. I'm just one of those people who, like, if everybody else likes something, I'm like, oh, I don't like them. And then I'll wait until later. I'm like, oh wait, they're actually really great. So,
okay. Yeah.
But when I saw them play, what really struck me was the way that this like really minimal band got together on stage and started playing. And, there's always that awkwardness of the first song and the sound check and getting things settled in. And then all of a sudden it just clicked. And it was like this massive sound that made perfect sense coming from just very few musicians. And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, they've perfected what they do. I know a lot of people, it's either hit or miss with people, whether they like U2 or not. I do. I love them.
That's probably good for you, right?
it's okay. I didn't really have a choice. My big brother got me into them at a very young age. He was my main source of influences for music when I was super young. But thankfully I did enjoy U2's music all the way up, and I've seen them many, many times. There's something really special about seeing them in Croke Park, which is our national stadium for Gaelic football and hurling Gaelic games in Ireland. I've seen them there, and it's a really big stadium. Seen them there a couple of times. I've also seen them in London a few times, but there really is something special about the hometown show. You see that with a lot of bands, and I absolutely love them.
I bet. Well, very cool. So, we don't have to make this a whole show about you too, but
I'll get
we can
Bono
make it
on the
about,
line. Just give me a second.
We'll make it just about you. How's that? Tell us a little bit more in your own words about how you are. I mean, I went through, you've done a ton of stuff. And I gave a pretty quick intro there, borrowed from your bio, literally word for word. But tell us more about some of the stuff that kind of got you into recording and the experiences you had. I mean, now you're at this place where you're, making an effort to give back to the music community and help teach as well. But, getting to that stage and learning how to make music professionally.
Well, first of all, I think I'm going to get you to just narrate my bio from now on when people want to know what's going on. I'm just
no problem.
take your voice and go, here it is. I did this recently where I was helping out some people, and they asked me to give like a brief overview of what I've done and how that applies to them and how I can help them. And we had an hour booked in, and I covered everything and gave them the advice, and we were all done in about 6 minutes. So it's like, I don't want to ruin your whole podcast, but I can give you a kind of a brief overview of how I got into all this stuff and what I've been doing over the years.
Sure.
So it was great that you kicked off with U2, because that's, I mentioned my brother. That's how I really got into music at a very young age. I was, always look up to the big brother, and he was the inspiration to be involved in music. He got going early. He was singing, and he was interested in guitar and drums and things like that. So I looked up to him, and I got involved in music at a young age. And the only instrument that I could actually hold was a trumpet, because I was so young. So we became part of a concert band and a choir, and just progressed from there. I studied music technology in university. It was the first music technology bachelor's degree in Ireland.
Wow. What year was that?
2005.
Right on.
So there were some courses, but this was the first degree. And I wasn't sure whether I was going to go and study pure music. I had an opportunity to go and just go and do a music degree. But this seemed like the cooler option, because at that stage, I'd been in and out of recording studios, recording with bands, and I had a couple of friends who had recording studios, or at least access to them. And I was a guitarist by that stage. I foolishly looked on the other side of the glass, thinking, maybe I'll do what that guy's doing,
Yeah.
And my life has been ruined ever since. So no, I studied that degree and then moved on from there to do a master's in computer music. And after that, briefly went to the States for a couple of months. I lived in Boston for a little while.
Oh, cool. That's where I'm from.
Oh, you're originally from Boston?
Yeah, it's funny because there's not many Irish in Boston, are there?
No, very, very, very few. It was really difficult to settle in. And, nobody wanted to buy you a drink. It was
right.
Very, very unfriendly town. That was actually the year they beat the Lakers.
Cool.
So it was that was pretty crazy. It was a great time to be there. So sorry, that was actually between the degree and the master's. After that, I came back, and so 2008, 2009, not the best time for anybody to be getting a job. Anyway,
right.
I put a more of a positive spin on it and said, well, it's not a good time for anybody to get a job. So, I'll focus my efforts on getting a job in music and in sound. But I managed to get an office job instead for a little while. I worked for a software company. That was what was on offer. None of the studios were hiring. Nothing was happening. I did that for about 6 months and could not stand it. Absolutely hated it and left. And said I wouldn't have an office job ever again. You know what it's like when you got a passion and something's calling to you, you got to go do it. Even if it's a bad market and you're lucky to have a job, you got to get out and do it. So
yeah, I was lucky. I wasn't really driven to really do much of anything else. I mean, once I decided to do recording, the only other job I ever did was delivering pizzas until I wrecked my car.
I think I need to hear that story.
I was just trying to do a U-turn. I was trying to get to the next pizza delivery. And I was like, I'll just do this U-turn right here in this intersection. Well, somebody else was trying to go straight through the intersection, so that didn't work very well.
Oh, man. Pizza everywhere.
Pizza everywhere. I probably sat there with my broken car and ate the slice of pizza, But anyway, well, cool. So so the office gig, and then you got out of that. What was the first gig you took right out of the office?
Well, it wasn't what I took. It was what I could get. I think I probably had a couple of part-time jobs to keep money coming in.
So you sort of were wise enough to say, I don't want to do this thing. I don't know what's next, but I don't want to do this over here. So you just got out of it without, with no net.
I appreciate you calling that wise.
It's a hard decision to make,
Yeah, there was rumblings of an opportunity in another part of the country to go and run a recording studio there. So I got even a half a sniff of that being an opportunity and said, this is what I'm going to go and do. There's any excuse to get out of what I was doing. That situation, that opportunity didn't actually materialize, but that was the stage where everybody gets set up for a career in music and audio, where you have to start knocking on every door. You have to start calling everybody. And that's what I did. And just looked every day for any opportunity to become an engineer anywhere. And then I just saw this ad one day for this company looking for an audio engineer. And I sent them we call them CVs over here, was your resume.
Yeah.
And I got the number of the guy who was hiring. I don't know how I got his number. I just called him all the time. Like the most annoying thing you can possibly do to anybody, but like not every day, not that level of crazy, but like once a week I'd kind of check in, and eventually I got the gig, and I got in, and I was just recording voiceovers. There's this motion graphics company that they were creating ads for, broadcast in store. So it's all like in store stuff, and libraries of music, and we were recording the offers. So I was the audio guy sitting in a busy room full of designers drawing stuff with headphones on, with people in like this makeshift like closet space that was our live room.
Just recording voiceovers or something like that.
Recording voiceovers and then having to mix them into a music bed. So actually amazing practice for everything else that was going to come down the line. So just figuring out how to get a really good sound with really minimal equipment, and absolutely nobody to help me. Nobody in that company knew what to do. That's why I was there. So I was fresh out of college, having to figure all this stuff out.
Yeah, not a lot of YouTube videos back then.
None, no. So a lot of a lot of going through forums, trying to piece stuff together, and tons of trial and error. But yeah, it was a really good opportunity. It was only a certain amount of time I was ever going to be working there, because it was actually an internship. There was no money involved, which was even better. So, free work, which everybody ends up doing at some stage.
Yeah.
But my break actually came because that company moved into doing TV ads, and I managed to get some music that I wrote placed in the TV ads for two companies. So that was a real game changer. A lot of that was, when I was on set on the TV ads, I was the boom op, I was the runner. I was actually in one of the TV ads. Like, I was just willing to do absolutely everything to gain experience. Like, it's just nuts when you look back at it and think, wow, I can't believe I did all that work.
So wait, you were the guy who was like, slice of Irish Spring. Sorry, I'm going way back here.
I was that guy. It's crazy to think back on it. But obviously, when you get registered to start collecting royalties, and that's the start, and that's where it kicked off. And then I had a few gigs that, when I needed to go and get the next job, I could point to them and say, well, here's the stuff that I have on TV, because I didn't have any credits except those. And, when you're just making stuff for in-store broadcasts, it's not stuff you can actually, you just come with me to the shop down the road and I'll play my work. So
that's a real challenge, actually, to be quite honest. A parallel for me was doing recordings at the Bonnaroo Hay Bale Festival for 15 years. And they were all just for radio, so they never got released and they were never posted online and shareable. So like 15 years worth of career content, and I can't show it off.
Man, that's crazy. And so they aren't archived anywhere. There's a little bit.
There were a few years where we brought in a video crew that went to YouTube, and then like maybe there's like one year there's a short Spotify playlist. But I mean, just great stuff. That I can play it at parties in my studio. I don't mean to take over this storyline. I just wanted to reinforce what you're saying and just remind the rock stars that, that ability to show your work is a really important thing, especially early on.
Yeah, and you got a cooler story as well, so I think that kind of wins in that in that example.
Whichever one brings the next gig, right?
Absolutely, yeah. But it was so valuable, though, to just have those few TV ads, because people could kind of see that, okay, this guy's pretty young. He's managed to get himself this far, so obviously he's hungry. And a job opportunity opened up at a studio where it had been a one-man show for a couple of years. He decided to build a second studio in the complex. He turned like the reception area into a studio, and he needed a second engineer. So I managed to get the gig there, and I worked there for the next few years. And his goal was to move more into animation sound design. That was a post-production studio, so it was all documentaries, short films, radio ads, TV ads, all that sort of stuff. But he wanted to move more into animation because he had done some to a very high level, and he wanted to really push the company that way.
Do you need to record direct stereo keyboards? Spectra 1964 now offers the Stereo BBDI2 with custom wound high-Z transformers for big headroom, virtually flat response, and a 15 dB input pad. The Spectra 1964 BBDI passive direct box is also perfect for recording deep bass that will make your mixes sound huge. Plug that into a C610 complementer, and as founder Bill Cheney points out, it'll move your pant leg. Get your sound moving at spectra1964.com. With so many game-changing iZotope plugins to choose from, deciding which one to buy next could be a bit of a challenge. But did you know that now you can have all their plugins through iZotope's new affordable subscription bundle, Music Production Suite Pro, for only $19.99 per month? Get your Rockstar extended 30-day free trial subscription now at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Now you're also a musician, so I mean you're a composer as well, right? So you mean these early stories, we're talking about learning how to mix voice against music, getting into sound beds for other things. Were you feeling like there was was there a part of you that was like, man, I really want to be making some music at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question, for sure. But I also knew the market at the time, and I knew the best way of getting my feet under a desk somewhere and getting experience in where I was lacking. You know, I hadn't done a ton of recording. I hadn't worked with lots and lots of people. I wanted to work in a place with lots of footfall, and I also saw with animation and with TV ads there would be opportunities to create music, and they certainly materialized. You know, very early in my career, I did have an opportunity to write music for a feature film, full-length feature for Universal. But I actually wasn't ready for that opportunity when it popped in.
Yeah.
So I didn't end up getting it in the end, but it wasn't as strategic as I think when I look back on it now, but it was, you know, I need to get in somewhere, get working. I don't want to go and do an office job. This is the absolute closest that I can get right now, and the music will come down the line.
Yeah.
And I know it will.
Well, so what was one of the first music opportunities? How did that appear?
Well, we kind of said yes to everything. So that can be good and it can be bad, but we had an animation studio who were creating a demo for a project that they wanted to start shipping around, because animation series, games, you know, movies, all this sort of stuff, it could take a really long time to get funded and get made. So the process starts maybe 2 years in advance or even more. So we were working with a couple of studios where we'd been recording a lot of their voices, doing a lot of the sound design. So sound design is incredibly creative, and it's a lot of fun. It's especially fun if you're a musician, because you can really play with sounds and manipulate them to work with the score that a composer is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that every single day, and I was starting to see, you know, what the composer was doing, and, you know, even where, you know, my fader might be mixing music up and down to kind of match the sound design, just to sort of see the nuances of what it was like to be a composer for motion picture. So yeah, we just an opportunity popped in one day where the guy said, "Yeah, we need music," and, you know, it's a classic story. The usual guy can't do it, so
right.
We just said, "Yeah, we'll do it." Q scrambling around in the background for the next, you know, however many hours to pull something together, and
just to rewind a sec. So sound design is like when you were creating like the swishes and the whooshes and the sound effects and that sort of thing, or no?
Yeah. In that situation, yes. Yeah, it would be all of the, but it would include Foley as well, you know, adding footsteps and blinks, and, you know, when you're talking about even a documentary, just adding in things like bird sounds and cityscapes and all of that sort of stuff.
There's a remarkable amount of stuff that goes in that we don't notice. We just think it's funny when you learn about that stuff and you watch a film or a TV show or, you know, a clip go by and there's all these things and you think, oh, that's just what it sounded like there. It's like, no, that's not what it sounded like there. You're probably not hearing any of the mics from the actual shoot, you know? It's probably almost all recreated.
Our nature documentaries are a great example of that, aren't they? When you start to think about it, you can also ruin them. So I don't want to ruin nature documentary for people, but like when you're looking, I wonder how they got that sound. Maybe they didn't get that sound.
Yeah.
Maybe that's added in. Is that what a chimp really sounds like? You know?
Well, my cousin was down in Costa Rica at one point, and he came back and he was saying that the Discovery Channel like came down to shoot. Yeah, I think he was a guide doing those zipline tours up in the canopy, and the Discovery Channel came down to shoot something, and he was like, oh man, they like when they needed a shot, they just like picked up some animal and placed it on the tree, and then quickly got a shot of it there. So, here you are wondering if the sound that you added to that shot was, genuine or not. It's like, I think it's all one and the same.
It's all an illusion.
It's all an illusion. That's right.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry. So keep going. You got to do the music.
Yeah. A few opportunities for music kind of here and there, but the main focus in that studio all of the time was on the sound design and mixing. And I mean, it's such a valuable thing to get under your belt, to learn as a musician as well, just because it teaches you so much about source material, just having really high quality source material, because there are so many effects libraries out there for music and for sound beds and for everything else. And some of them, now this has gone back quite a while, but some of them weren't of the best quality. So you'd pull stuff in and it just wouldn't work. And also trying to match your sound with what's on screen can be really difficult. And if you've got a sound that's been recorded really badly, it's just not going to have the same impact. So it's exactly the same, right? As if you're recording a band, you got to get great source material. What you do with it after that is up to you. You know what you're doing when you're producing and mixing it. But if you don't get good sounds, and by good I mean fit for purpose and fit to actually serve the song, then you're kind of in a bad state straight away. So it's exactly the same with this sort of work as well. So by doing just so much of that, I obviously still had the hunger to work with bands and musicians. So I started doing that in my air quotes free time. So I was lucky enough to have, this was my full-time job. I worked 9 to 6 every day, and it was a growing business. It was a vibrant business. We were working with so many people all the time, working on bigger and bigger stuff all the time. It was an amazing time in my life, great place to be. That studio has now gone on to be, way, way bigger than I ever, well, I could see it was going to grow over time, but they moved into video. They started to offer other services. They now have a full-time composer. They've been, one of the guys I trained there has been nominated for an Emmy. It's absolutely crazy how fast they built over the last sort of 7 or 8 years. But a fantastic place for me. But I didn't quite have that, let's say, the producer side of me, and I mean like the music producer side of me, fulfilled. So I had a couple of things popped up, and it was actually through my old university. I got a call from one of my lecturers who put me in touch with a band that needed a producer, and I started working with bands that way. And I had friends in bands, and I started to do things there, and just these really cool opportunities started to pop up, both inside work, inside my job, and then outside, just starting to spread my wings as a freelancer as well, and starting to try and find these opportunities. And it all just started to really, really come together. People were starting to call me up and ask me could I help them with their music, and I wasn't really pushing that side of things too much. There was very little outreach because there's only so much work that you could do in your evenings and weekends without, becoming burned out or compromising the work that you were doing. So it was all going great. And around that time I started to do Dave Pinsado's mixing competitions, just to really work on some stuff that, this is either stuff that, Dave himself was touching, or people at the, let's say, just more out of curiosity, see what, stems from other sessions looked like and things like that. And it was also a great way to maybe get a bit of exposure and things like that. So I started to do a few of those. I started to watch Pinsado's place pretty religiously, because that was the first one that started to do those on-screen interviews. You got a lot more these days, and but it was great. And the Into the Layers back then were that was like gold dust to see Dave working for me anyway. I was hooked on those. And an opportunity popped up there where there was this competition to it was Jack Joseph Puig had just opened a studio. It was like I think it was like built on a golf course or somewhere like that. I totally forget the details now, but it's this like crazy studio. They call it like the House of Rock. And I entered this competition, and it was you get to go to the opening. I think this is what it was. It was like 4 people or whatever, and I was one of the winners. So I said, "Oh, great!" But I actually couldn't go. I couldn't go at the time. I couldn't get myself over to where it was, and
bummer.
I know. It would have been a great opportunity, but I actually just couldn't go. I had way too much on with work, and there was no way that I could swing it. And if it's one of those small business things, you just I probably couldn't even afford the flights. Let's boil it down to the basics. Like I'd say I couldn't afford the flights from Dublin over. That's probably the main reason, thinking back.
It's a bit of a haul, bit of a journey there.
But the greatest thing happened. I emailed the producer, Will. It was Will back then of the show, and just thanked him for the opportunity. But I said I couldn't go, and he was so happy that somebody had gotten back to him so quickly. So that I just said, "Can you give my place to somebody else?" And he was happy that, like, with these things, somebody will leave it to the last minute and then say, "Oh, I can't go," and they can't like give the place to somebody else. So he was delighted. So I just said to him, "Is there any chance?" I think he said to me, "Is there anything that we can do for you instead?" And I said, "Is there any chance I could maybe drop Dave an email with a couple of questions?" And I did, but instead of that, Dave said, "Let's have a Skype chat." So
nice.
That was early in my career, and I got to spend a couple of hours chatting with Dave Pensato, and it was so generous of him to give me his time and provide me with all this wisdom, and just it was a real game changer, because I started to then think about, he was recommending getting to because I was telling him about where I was, just what I described there now, about working full time, doing music on the side, or in my free time, and wanted to do more of that. And he was saying, you got to get yourself to a big city. And he was saying that it was possible to. This advice now is kind of outdated with how things have moved over the last almost 10 years.
Sure.
But he was quite visionary in what he said, because he was saying, it probably is possible to make it big from a place like Dublin, and with the way technology will advance over the next few years, you probably will get the opportunity. So, Dave was totally right. But he said your chances of success are amplified even further if you're in a bigger city, which I do agree with. I do agree with mostly. We've seen a change over the past 18 months, 2 years of how things operate in general. But it does help to be in one of those big cities. So that really stuck with me.
It's the community, right? It's not even the city so much as it's just the being around people and interacting with people on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And I had positioned myself to be in that situation in Dublin. It's just that when you're in a higher footfall place like London or Nashville or LA, New York, any of these, traditionally amazing music cities, which is, thankfully my city is as well. It's the volume is just not there. A lot of the big artists or people who get to a certain point in the industry in Ireland, they tend to go and travel for a bit at least. Whether they come back or not is another thing. I think most people do. But it really stuck in my head. And he said something else to me as well, that was, you don't strike me as the type of guy that would just kind of drop everything up and leave, which is kind of what he did. And that really stuck with me, because it was like one of those things of, when you tell a 3-year-old they can't do something. I was kind of that 3-year-old after that then, so his time, and it really stuck with me just how generous he was. He didn't need to talk to me, as an absolute nobody, and his time and the information that he shared with me was just absolutely incredible. Like he's an amazing guy, and I'm still to this day very, very grateful for what he said and the advice he gave me.
The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings that classic vintage tone. Our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, Recording Studio Rockstars listeners. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 50% off the V67, V47, or the new V12 microphone at jzmic.com. Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs, whether you are setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class studio for professional mixing and mastering. Their unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design is famous for creating smooth, detailed imaging that let your speakers disappear into your music, allowing you to focus on the mix. Visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for lots of cool free interviews, tutorials, masterclasses, and learn how to set up your studio monitor and control room. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode. Yeah, Dave's a sweetheart. We did a webinar with recently with Dave and Michael Brower and Sylvia Massey, and it was fun to hang out with all three of them for a minute. Well, very incredible. Cool. So now you've obviously come a long way from trying to get your feet in on the music to creating stuff, and we put together a playlist in Spotify of some of the songs that you've shared. Cetog, Spheres, Solis, if I'm pronouncing all those right, Anna Phoebe.
There's a lot of other stuff that I've done over the years, very similar to what you were talking about, where you'll have been a part of a project, or it'd be like a live performance, or it'd be lots of other things. There's so many other studios and live things that I've been part of that, those recordings are gone. And it's such an important point that you raise, because it reminds me, as soon as you started saying that, it reminded me of all this stuff that you do that's just gone. You don't have the record for where it's gone after that. But yeah, I decided I was going to go to a bigger city, which was kind of crazy considering how well things were going for me in Dublin. And I set the wheels in motion to move to London. So I started going over there, started meeting people in studios on both the music and the post-production side. And I couldn't get the timing right, It was one of these things of, I don't know the right time to move. And you only figure out after you kind of do it that the timing is never right for any of these these things, I'm sure you've had many experiences like that where you kind of go, oh, will I do this or will I do that? And
well, my friend, I call him my brother from another podcast, Matt Boudreau, once gave me wise advice where he just said, he's like, dude, opportunity doesn't usually knock at the most convenient time. That's a great one. And experience is something you get after you need it as well.
Yeah, right. There you go. It's so crazy, and you kind of just have to jump. And I was not really one of those guys. I there are examples earlier, but I was so young that I could just go and jump. When I left the office job to say, hey, I'm gonna go into one of the worst job markets ever and try and do what I really want to do.
So this was going to London, you mean?
Yeah, this was earlier on when I was saying I'm going to leave the office job and I'm going to jump, go out and get an audio job. I was okay because I was so young, but this was 6 or 7 years later, and I had a career to think about, and I was waiting for this concrete opportunity in London, and I had some opportunities that were kind of on the cusp of coming through, but I just said, you know what, I just got to set a date and go. And that's what I did. I just set a date, and I moved at the start of the year. It was in 2014, and I just got going. I just got over there and just had to not quite start again because you've got your years of experience, but just get going in a new city, and things worked out for me. There was a couple of opportunities at the start that, the standard stuff of false promises and things falling through that you just got to keep your head down and keep going. And
yeah, sure. Did you end up getting kind of a gig at a particular studio, or is it more like find a project here, find a project there, and just start piecing it all together?
That's a great question. I had a gig in every studio, man.
Nice, man.
No, I was just it was the same thing, just knocking on doors, just trying to working in some great studios, working with some lovely, amazing people, being introduced by mutual friends, mutual connections, and then just working in some of the worst studios that were out there as well, and places that weren't run well. But a bad studio doesn't mean it's full of bad people. I met some lovely people along the way and had some cool opportunities there too. And you got to feel out a new city. You can't just go in and say, I'm this or I'm that. You got to get in and meet people. And like you said, build up as part of that community as well, become part of that community. That just doesn't happen. You can't just land in and say, I'm this guy or that guy. And I wasn't that guy either. When you move to a city like London, you're the quality, well, there's quality in every city, but the volume of people and the quality of engineers and musicians around is insane. So the first gig the big gig that I got is crazy. It actually landed in from clients that I'd worked with in Dublin. They brought me an animation series and they asked me to do all the sound design work on it. And at the same time, I'd started working with this company that was, this was an opportunity I wouldn't have got in Dublin. I wouldn't have got this opportunity in Ireland because the type of company didn't exist. But this company was working on audio. There were audio consultants, audio user experience consultants for these big companies, these like Fortune 500 companies. I meant that you mentioned Walgreens. That was one of the main things that I did with them for quite a long period of time. So the two gigs happened at once. I was doing the animation work, and I was working with this company on something that I'd never done before, but I thought that was just absolutely fascinating. So anywhere where the user experience could break, a lot of the times with Walgreens in terms of audio, that was the amount of their call volume was insane. So we spent most of our efforts on their IVR system, which I didn't know what an IVR system was.
What is an IVR system?
Interactive voice response. So there those press one for this, press two for this. But it was so crazy because I'd never heard about these, but the company that I was working with was going through this transition from working on those systems to starting to work on personal assistants. And that was around the time of Siri and Amazon Alexa and
right.
all that sort of stuff starting to come through. So the people that I was working with there were really brilliant, and they were. I just learned so much about branding and marketing and all this other stuff that we need for our career while I was working there.
Right on. Well, what was the first? How do we get to the? We want to hear about the music.
Of course.
How do we get? What was your first chance to like really record something you were excited about in London?
I had a few gigs in some of those studios that I was floating in and out of, and a couple of interesting projects that I'm pretty sure I can't talk about even now, where I was working with a couple of really established engineers and producers, and I just got to kind of sit in and work with them, and that was really very cool.
Hey, sorry, Queen Elizabeth won't mind if you talk about the session you did with her.
Yeah. Well, you see, that's another thing. Like there's so many, I'm sure you're in the exact same position. There's so many things that I've done as well where you got to be so careful about NDAs and things like that. So
less so for me, just because I've done, I did a first chapter interacting with major labels, and then the, following chapter up to now has just been primarily independent artists, which I love because it's just like you can just, everybody's chill, everybody's just excited to get the word out about their music in any form or fashion.
That's really cool. Yeah, independent artists it's a really nice way to go, and that's exactly how things started to go for me in London. I just started to meet people. I just started to be out and about, maybe at a gig, or thankfully I had a network of friends I went to college with who'd already moved to London long before me. They'd started a band, they went touring, they started doing all this stuff. And, some of them had opportunities in studios and some of them were doing other things. And they just had this network of people. So if you went out for food or you just went to go and see a gig, you just bump into musician friends of theirs, and you start to get gigs that way. So it just happened really organically. We started to pick up these projects, and I didn't try and say I would record with any of these guys. I just said that I'd mix their stuff, because that's where I felt that I could stand out, because that's what I'd been doing for so long. You know, that's what I am. Kind of first and foremost. That's how I really got going. So
going all the way back to that closet with the voice over the music bed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love using iZotope plugins for my music and podcast productions. In fact, you're hearing Ozone and RX on my voice in this podcast episode. And now you can get access to all the iZotope plugins through the new subscription bundle. For only $19.99 per month, Music Production Suite Pro is designed for the serious recording, mixing, and mastering engineer, putting the finishing touches on music, film, and podcasts with fully pro versions of Ozone, RX, Neutron, Nectar, Neoverb, Tonal Balance Control, Visual Mixer, and more, including free plugin updates. And just for you rock stars, get an extended 30-day free trial subscription at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscription. The STX-100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX-100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX-100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX600 modules, combining the STX100 mic pre and C610 into a single 500 module. Now you can get the same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's BBDI and complementers. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Stephen Kelly, joining us from Dublin, Ireland. Stephen, are you ready to jam?
I am, of course. Yes, absolutely.
Dig it, dude. Well, you've made some really cool records, and I thought if it's all right with you, I'll just jump right into chatting about a couple of these. As you finally got your feet settled in and started to get to make music in the studio, which I think was that was always your goal, right? Was wanting to be making records.
Yeah, definitely. Always wanted to be making records, but I was also fascinated by anything to do with sound. So
sure,
when opportunities popped up, I kind of took them. But yeah, it was just through the network that I had started to. One of my friends was an assistant engineer. We was an assistant engineer on some of Noel Gallagher's stuff.
Oh, cool.
And he introduced me to his engineer, and we started to do some sessions there. I was called in as the Pro Tools guy on a couple of on a weekend. There was a long session going on, and they needed somebody that just knew Pro Tools inside out for Tal Wilkenfeld. I might be pronouncing her name wrong.
Okay.
And she's a bassist. She's played with pretty much everybody. She was doing her solo record, and I was kind of called in to help out there. So all these things just started to pop up where, somebody needed a mixer, or somebody needed a this or that. And, I still had all these, thankfully, again, I had like a full-time gig for the most part, but gradually just started to meet more people, just mix more things. And at this time, I had an opportunity with Kirk, and I'm going to get to...
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about that. So Kirk Teachout, who connected us.
Yeah, so it's crazy. I was listening to the podcast that you did with him just last week, and it's almost like going back in time, because it's the time you were saying you both were saying his son was 11 weeks old. And that was the time that I started working with with Kirk kind of just before that, a couple of months before that.
So bring us up to speed again. Just as a reminder, you guys were making YouTube. You were making music for YouTube videos. Very, very clever idea. That was, I mean, we're talking about Rockstars. We're talking about, if you think 1 million views on a video is pretty impressive, try 50 million or more on like every video. Tell us about that project you guys are doing.
That was insane. So it was Kirk's gig, and his story, just listening back to his story again on your podcast, was fascinating. And if anybody's listening to this, definitely go and check that out, because it's his story is incredible about how he kicked that all off. And it was so interesting listening back to him saying that he got into a point where he couldn't work on all of the stuff anymore. And it was crazy how many people he was helping, so many people, because Kirk's just one of those guys, an amazing dude, and he's so honest, and his integrity is incredible. And he just found all these people that, for him, he wanted to help, and he found musicians everywhere. But myself and him met in another way, and we just clicked straight away, and I became his mixing engineer for all these projects. So I kind of quit everything else I was doing, just working with him for, it was almost 18 months that we were nice. Working on, I was mixing, I was writing.
But what were you guys making? That's where we're the
nursery rhymes.
Exactly. You guys were taking nursery rhymes and recording them as like, picture a happy, smiling hippopotamus bouncing along, purple hippo bouncing along and singing a song for kids in the car, right?
Yeah. They were going on these YouTube videos. The channels are crazy. Like you said, I think the channels had like 50, 60, 70 million subscribers, and the views were just insane. And
they were getting watched across language, across the world. Like, I mean, I think Kirk said like in Korea, that was a huge market for these videos or something like that too.
Yeah. He started out with 5. I think he just did, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. He did five songs initially, and the guy came back to him like 6 months later, and then it was like 10, then it was 20. And we were doing 20 a month in 18 different languages. And then we started doing animated series as well with them, and I had to start hiring people for Kirk. I had to start getting people, and because I was based in London, if we had a Swedish female singer that we didn't have, that somebody dropped out of the project, I could go and get them way easier than him maybe trying to find somebody like that in Memphis.
Oh, right, because it needed to be in the language, in each language.
Yeah, and they needed to be native speakers as well. So that was a crazy time. So I stopped doing pretty much everything I was doing, focused on that, and my whole schedule just opened up because it was all batched. We could just work through I was working through all these mixes at once. This is a huge tip for anybody really interested in starting to get more efficient in the studio. If you can, just batch or automate where you can. So I'd know when people would be delivering stuff. I could batch all of the mixing together. It actually went back to one of the first mixing gigs that I ever had, where you're leveling the voice with the sound bed and the music underneath, and then the rest of the week I might be composing these tracks. But Kirk mentioned it as well. Trying to make one of these, you have to do it super fast. Yeah. So you got to learn how to write stuff super quick. Okay, there's a certain amount of it that's if you're doing Twinkle Twinkle, the melody, but you have to put in counter melodies, and you have to redo the style every few months. And
but the other ones were nursery rhymes that didn't have a song, right?
Yeah, like we'd even find we were doing all sorts of stuff. We were finding nursery rhymes in other languages that weren't in English, or maybe there'd be one in Spanish that wasn't in Italian, and we were translating them and starting to do them in other languages. So yeah, it was absolutely wild. But it gave me a great opportunity, which I'm still grateful for. Working with Kirk is amazing. I still work with him on stuff now. He's a great guy. But I started starting to get opportunity to work with more artists. It was around that time that I started understanding audio, started teaching people. And one of the projects that's on the playlist is with that the guy I mentioned who's an assistant engineer, he branded himself as Patient Zero, which is not a great name over the past couple of years.
I describe, yeah, right. I know. I described that one stylistically as art synth dance track.
I like that. That's great.
Yeah, I don't know if it was great, but thank you.
He might nick that.
All right, please do.
And that was cool because it was the first time that I'd ever done a project that was it was mostly a mastering gig. He had his production and everything all sorted. He just wanted me to kind of work with him on putting the final kind of pieces together. So we had a bit of a chat about mixing, and I was pushing him to release an album for ages because he was engineering and he was working with so many cool people, but I really wanted him to release music. So I was pushing him for ages and ages and ages. Eventually he said, okay, I'm going to do it. So we chatted a bit about mixing and things like that, but he actually got it to a stage where he was quite happy with. So I was just working with the 2 tracks of the whole thing, just to kind of, it was an interesting gig to describe, kind of like a hybrid mixing mastering job, which I'm sure you've done as well. And I'm sure plenty of the rock stars listening have done
so
too.
How do you mean though? Like, what does that mean, a hybrid between mixing and mastering?
Like, it was more than just loudness. It was more than just getting it all to, it was really, so it was end to end telling a story, kind of like, the best example of it, like Dark Side of the Moon, where everything just flows into the next. So it was finding the right cut points, just making sure that would all work, and making sure, it's not the start stop, all that sort of stuff. And tracks that had been made and mixed maybe 2-3 years before that matched these other tracks, and some of them would be really narrow, really kind of mono, but he wanted like a cohesive sound the whole way through. So it was a little bit more than mastering. Technically, it still is mastering, but you're kind of trying to mix the two tracks as well. That makes sense.
Too bad you didn't have isotope rebalance at that point, right? Because you could have just taken those 2 mixes and remixed the bass and kick and snare and whatever you need.
I know, that's a great plug for isotope. It was a really great experience though, and I've had a lot of those jobs that might they kind of sound, I'm probably not describing that very well, but they kind of sound awkward, or on paper they look like they're really, difficult gigs, but they turn out to be the best learning experiences.
Yeah. Well, it's a great sounding record, and I love just overall, if I just look at your playlist, again, Solis, Sitog, Spheres, Patient Zero, these all have really unique, bold, creative characteristics about the mix and everything, which I really dig. So with that particular one, like you say, it was more of a mastering experience. How about stop me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, Sitog.
That's Kitog.
Kitog. Okay.
Yeah. So he
reminds me of Gautier.
Yeah, he might hate that. He might hate that comparison, right. But I'm definitely gonna hit him with that again.
And then like it's got this really cool. I said, I wanted to ask you about the cool rim knock sound because it reminds me of Prince. It's very, very like Prince and the Revolution kind of vibe, which is cool.
Yeah, he's great. That again was one of those gigs where, so he's one of my best friends. We went to college together, and he's somebody that I've been again pushing for years to release his stuff, and he's releasing more and more now. And the stuff that he's doing now is I feel way beyond the first kind of releases that he put out. But I love that music too. We're actually at a point now where we're writing together, which it's just so cool because he's one of those people who was so precious about his material, and it took him a while to kind of loosen up a bit and let other people touch his stuff. So I started out saying, let me at least just master your music for you. I'm not a mastering engineer first and foremost, but I know how to do it. So I'm like, look, let me save you some money. Let me do this for you. Just, as your friend, let me try and get the most out of this for you.
So what's a typical writing collaborative process now? I mean, how would you guys go back and forth and write it? Would you write together in the studio, or would one of you work on it, send it to the other person, then send it back kind of thing? What's typical?
I'd say he probably could have killed me when we first started writing together. That's a line for you.
How so?
So I did one of the best things I've ever done was in January 2021. I did Ryan Tedder's songwriting and music production course.
Right.
And I just absolutely loved every minute of it because I intentionally took January off to just focus on my own personal songwriting and production and just sort of level up massively because I'm in a bit of a new chapter now where I am doing that rather than just production and mixing. I'm kind of going back to where I started out as a composer, and I'm working with artists now right from the very start to write with them, and just totally loving it more than anything else I've ever done. And the third project in this course was a collaborative project, and so I picked Kitog to work with, and he and I at the time were both in lockdown, so everything was done over Zoom. And it was great. We just started out with a loop together. Our pre-production was a chat. You know, how all good pre-production and how all good sort of pre-writing sessions should kind of start. You know, regardless of him being one of my best friends for however many years, we still got together, and I was sort of saying to him, you know, we're going to do this. This is part of a project. This is an assignment that I have to do. But how can I use this in such a way that you have something that, you know, you might be proud of and might want to release? You know, no pressure. Just, is there a way that we can do this that we could come out with something that you as an artist would be happy with? Mm-hmm. And, you know, my take on that to him was, I'd love to hear you with something that might be slightly more radio friendly, you know, the nasty, those nasty two words, radio friendly, right? Because his music is fantastic, but you describe it. I think you have better descriptions than me. What way did you describe his style?
I described it as a art synth dance track.
Yeah. So yeah,
whatever that means.
I mean, it's all very cool. So I was trying to say, you know, let's not go full pop, but something a little bit more accessible. And instantly I could sort of see him getting uncomfortable. So yeah, job of a producer, writing partner is just to find that sort of middle ground. And we did that. We sort of just started out with a loop over Zoom, and just, you know, we were trying to figure out what BPM, you know, the standard stuff. And he sent it to me. I started putting some drums on it, sent it back to him. And
what was let's break that down a little bit. How exactly did, you know, lockdowns or no lockdowns, we're always going to want to work with people who aren't in our town with us. And so the process of working over Zoom, I mean, that's been something we've wanted to do for a long time. It just accelerated this past year. What did you discover about smart ways to do that makes it easy? Did you try some things where you're like, oh, screw it, that's a pain in the ass, let's just do it this way? How did you do it? Did you stream the audio some way? Did you send it right over Zoom? Was it really easy to hear what the other person was working on at that time?
Yeah, they're all great questions. I've done this so many times since, because, you know, like I was saying, this is the direction that I'm moving now. So I'm working with artists all over the place. I've got, you know, an artist I'm working with in Austria, and a great artist I'm working with in Detroit, and, you know, a couple of people in LA that I'm starting to work with. And in the writing part of it, I've found that, you know, you can use, I was saying the name of it, you can use the Audio Movers plugin, and you can just stream directly down. Or it depends on what way people want to work. Some people don't want to let that technical stuff kind of, I know it's not getting in the way, but it almost feels like getting in the way. They just want to chat with you, and they just want to throw stuff out. So some people would just want, you know, your laptop going, and they're just playing stuff, and you can just hear it down, and you go, yeah, that's a cool idea, send me that stuff, and you throw it into your session and work on it.
Right. So what you hear over the video sounds like crap, but it's enough to know that, oh, that's a good idea. And then
Yep.
you hear the good thing once it's just sent over in Dropbox or whatever.
For sure. And it's also a pretty decent test, right? Like it's not, I'm not saying that's the way to work all the time. I've done the streaming audio straight down Zoom as well to make sure that the mixes are sounding great. And, you know, it is exactly from the DAW and you can hear everything pristinely and clear. But it's a pretty cool way of trying to figure out whether the vibe is right. If you've got somebody playing, yeah, I don't know, just what you think of these drums. Like I was chatting, you know, my friend was talking about that I'm working with in Detroit. We hadn't actually been really, we've never been in a room together. In our first chat, we got talking. This is our first, we've been emailing each other, you know, chatting on Instagram or whatever. This is our first sort of interaction with each other over Zoom, which is weird. Like it's weird. It is what it is. But you just kind of have to remove that and go, you know, we just started talking about our lives, you know, the standard stuff, you know, that you're meant to do when you're working with artists and you're working with people that you want to work with. You don't just get straight into, let's write a song and it needs to be this way and in this key. And
it usually starts with, you want coffee?
Yeah, virtual coffee.
Can I make you a oat milk cappuccino? That's what I say to people in my
absolutely
studio.
You can. I'm going to hold you to that one for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so we just got talking, and then as I was chatting away, he just started like, oh man, I feel like really inspired, and started like blasting out some drums, and you know, picked up his acoustic guitar, and within like 15 minutes, we had the bones of a song that we were kind of pumped about, we were excited about, and thought that this could go somewhere, and the whole purpose of just meeting up that day was just to introduce ourselves and see if we wanted to make a song. And by the end of it, you know, the classic thing, you come out with something that's kind of effortless and cool, and then he could send it to me, and you know, I'm going to work on it this week, and send it back to him, and then we'll meet up again, and you know, then we'll maybe look at upgrading what way we're streaming stuff. But I think anything that gets in the way of the process at the start and makes people uncomfortable or weird or anything like that is just avoid it. Like, don't spend 45 minutes trying to get your streaming set up perfect.
Exactly.
Just try and get into it, you know? Nothing
creative about that. I mean, it's fun to do when we just put on our technician engineer hat and that's all we're thinking about. And I feel like that's a thing I've come to terms with too. Like, it's okay to want to be a creative that makes music and also want to be an engineer that likes hooking up things, you know? Like, it's okay for us to want to hook up things. It's just the problem is when we mix the two.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Lidge. It's if you just want to play around with your toys and or play with a new plugin that you've got, and like you're insistent on using this new thing, and it's to the detriment of the song, the story you're trying to tell, or the development of the artist, or anything that you're doing with that person at that time, you're actually putting your relationship in jeopardy by just trying to fiddle around with this new toy. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, there's probably people listening to this saying there's a much easier way to do what you're describing, and great, but that's just what's worked for me over this time, and over time everything always evolves, right? That's just the first iteration of how this stuff works. There'll be better ways of doing all this. You know, you even mentioned that isotope plugin that would have saved me time years ago. In a few years, we'll be doing things in a different way again. And, you know, as things progress, when you're working with artists remotely, if you do a song, you do a collaboration, and you love working together, one way or another, you end up meeting up in person anyway. Either they come to you or you go to them. You know, that's the kind of the end goal with all of this, that you can actually maybe work on an even bit longer project, or, you know, more tracks, or collaborate with other people and bring them in.
Yeah. And I mean, again, just to reiterate that, it's like, it's okay that we want to, as engineers, we want to try and figure out, how do I connect this app to that app so that they talk to each other and that it follows it and it's all in sync now and everything. It's just like you're saying, don't do that when it's time to create. Do that a different time, so that when you're creating, it either is already set up and it works great, or it doesn't. I mean, like, here we are, we're doing an interview over the internet right now, which is remarkable. You know, it's pretty amazing, actually, between Dublin and East Nashville. Let me just say that when I traveled to London back in 91, a long distance phone call had a lot worse delay between the two of us speaking. But, we're using Skype, but I have like notes up in front of me on the computer screen. But then I also just have a pad of paper and a pencil in front of me because there's nothing that's faster for me than just writing ideas down with pencil and paper. It's like you always got to keep it as simple as it needs to be to keep the creation going.
That's such an interesting point, Lidge. What do you think is the most, why do you think that's so impactful? Like just a pen and paper. What is it?
I think it's the first tool we learn how to use. The internet can't screw it up. It can't freeze. I mean, the pencil can break. That sucks. If
then you've got two pencils.
No, I got 4 or 5. I sharpen them all before I go.
Wow. Okay. I'm talking to a real veteran of pencils here.
A real pencil veteran. All number 2. All number 2s. Atom Audio designs monitors with a mission to bring accuracy, transparency, and high definition to your studio, guiding you each step of the way on your journey from starting out in a home studio to installing your ultimate mixing setup in your pro studio. Check out their complete line of speakers and headphones from the T series to the AX series to their top-of-the-line S series, which all use the unique ART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, famous for creating smooth, detailed imaging that let your speakers disappear into your music. Want to feel awesome to make brilliantly accurate creative decisions in your mixes because you can finally hear your music clearly? Your ears are the greatest instrument you have, and if you can hear the music, then you can mix the music. Visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for lots of cool free interviews, tutorials, masterclasses, and learn how to set up your studio monitors and control room. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode. Look, every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low-end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage series are built by hand in Latvia, using only the best electronic components, and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, Rockstars. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 50% off the vintage series mics V67, V47, and the new V12 at jzmic.com. I can't write very fast if I write with pencil and paper. So that part's not fast. It's faster to type, but it's it's easier to like decide, I'm not going to write out a whole word. I'm only going to like do like some little code. And I guess, sorry, full transparency, I did do a doodle while we were talking too. So you can't do that on the computer as easily.
Yeah, you got to open up Photoshop and figure out all that stuff. So yeah, right. There is something really about it, like really strong. Even for me, my recall is much better when I write something down versus putting a note in my phone or a note on the computer. I can always remember things much better if it's probably down to how how we learn in school. I don't know, kids these days, if they're just learning on laptops, maybe their recall is better. But if you commit it to paper, if you're in a session and an idea comes to you, like for me, I have to have a pad and paper, even if I'm surrounded by a laptop and my main computer and a phone, I'll be writing stuff down. I always just write it down. I'm exactly the same as you.
Yeah. I like to have pad and paper in the studio during listen back, for example. So we're listening to stuff, and the moment I think of something, I've got a little way to take a little note, and then I can forget about it because then I'll go back and I'll remember, oh yeah, I need to bring the snare up or the something down, or I need to take a look at this part, the bass and the bridge, or here was my idea for an overdub. And, there's nothing that beats that, just writing it down really quickly.
But your main point is so important, though, around not letting the technology get in the way, because, a big part of one of my jobs as a producer was timing sessions with expensive talents. repetitively over a long period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
if the technology breaks down, which it does, you got to make up the time. Or if you're trying to do something that's too elaborate, or you're trying to use a new thing or figure out a new workflow, it's just going to break. And so many times, you may walk in on a session and somebody's doing something a specific way, and you can see, we're not going to get this done by the end of the hour. You got to improvise, and you got to be able to figure out what the next thing is. Or, that's a huge part of our job is troubleshooting and trying to work within budgets and work within timeframes and make sure it still serves the song. You're not just making crap because it has to be done in 15 minutes. And a big barrier to that is technology and using it the wrong way, or trying to be too elaborate when, why go A, B, C, D when you can just go from, A to D straight away. It's a great point. And what we just spoke about, Zoom sessions, things like that. I'm sure there are people who have workflows that are absolutely perfect and just work straight out the box. And, I'm happy to hear all those. But it's just what works at the end of the day. Like you said, just a simple Skype conversation can solve a lot of things very, very quickly.
Well, and it's also the letting ourselves be surrounded by multiple tools, each of which does a particular thing for the studio. For example, your DAW, your DAW is capable of recording and doing the MIDI, and you could have a virtual instrument in there, and you could probably pull up a tuner on the screen, and you can, supposedly there's a tap tempo feature in there somewhere, but like none of those things really, they don't always work in the moment when you really need them to. So it's like, that's a reason why it still probably makes sense for that keyboardist to bring in their Nord keyboard and just plug that in analog and get all the sounds that way. Or, I never use the tap tempo feature in Pro Tools on a session. I just don't. It just never works. So I could be, recording the band, and then I just have like an old Dr. Rhythm drum machine. And the way that the button works on it makes it perfect for doing tempo to find the tempo of a session and, a song in real time without interrupting. Yeah. That's such a critical thing. It's like, if you wanted to find the tempo of the session and you go, oh, I think that might be about 110. And then you type that in and then you play the click for everybody. How's that? Now they just lost their groove and they're like, oh, I don't know. Does that feel right? I don't know. Maybe it's a little slow. Or if you tried to like say, oh, I'm not going to ask them, I'm just going to tap along while they're playing. And then you hit the tap tempo, it's probably going to stop the DAW from recording or playing anymore while you're doing that. Yeah. I don't know which ones might not do that, but using like an external one means that you can non-intrusively find the tempo for something. When people need tuners in the studio, they don't ask you to pull up the tuner plugin on the computer. They just pull their iPhone out.
Yep.
That's what everybody does now.
Anything that breaks the flow, isn't that it? Anything that breaks the creative flow, or, like you said, even just like throwing a drummer off as you're getting into the groove to change the tempo and he used to start again, then maybe he doesn't have the same pattern he was playing and the groove is gone, like, or he's not in the pocket anymore. That's a problem. And it's, one person has created that for a whole band or an artist. And, it's a quick way to draw attention to yourself.
That's great. Yeah. All right. Well, so now here's another record you did, Spheres. Symbiotic has got this like almost 9 Inch Nails distorted quality to drums and synths and stuff. And it's really cool sounding. And I just wondered if you wanted to talk about, getting bold with our distortion when mixing and in the studio. Any lessons you learned there?
That's a cool track. That actually came to me through Understanding Audio. That came to me. I forget exactly how we ended up talking, but that was another mastering gig. And just trying to maximize, exactly like you said, just trying to maximize the grittiness of it without just tearing it apart, really. Just trying to do what he was looking to do in the mix, and just take it to that next level. So just adding some saturation to it can really help, without killing it, because you can
even
go
at the mix stage.
Even
at the mastering stage is what I mean.
Yeah, put some extra saturation on it in the mastering stage, just to to kind of make it all work. Just a small bit, nothing crazy.
So what was a useful tool for that?
I use the main saturation plugin that I use all the time is the Kramer Master Tape.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's one of the main ones that I end up using most of the time.
You just dig it?
Yeah, there's just something about it. It's also a tool that I kind of, I don't know about you, but like once I get something that works, I kind of stick with it.
Yeah.
You know, you can have a million plugins and, you know, you can have various variations of the same thing. But once I get something that I know kind of suits, I kind of stick with it, and I don't really swap it out too much. So yeah, just wanted to take it to the next level, make it really wide as well, just kind of spread it out. So I was using on those kind of mastering gigs, which are, again, they're not like just this, I suppose not this straight mastering gigs. You know, I'm not really a mastering engineer. It's a job that I can do. I don't declare myself as being a mastering engineer. I use the Brainworks mid-side EQ a lot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's it.
What is it, EQ3 now? Is that the one they've got? But it's got, you know, multi-band EQ, but you can switch it to mid-side, and it also has the mid-side widening knob.
And the mid-side widening knob is great. Like it's very cool because you can mess around with wideners, especially at that stage, like right at the end of a mix or like in mastering, and totally ruin the whole thing and start introducing phase everywhere and just making a mess of it. But that plugin, I don't know how many times I've used that plugin, and I use it in mixing on a lot of the time on synths or something that I wanted, you know, just the classic mid-side applications in mixing. But yeah, that was a master that I think he'd done a really nice job on the set. He knew his own sound. He'd done it all himself. I was really impressed when he sent it through to me, but he just wanted to kind of take it to the next level. So I think we were talking about doing some mixing on it, but I just kind of said, you know, I probably just need to master this for you and just try to clear up a few little bits. You know, I really go in on EQ. Like I only know, I feel like I've only scratched the surface with it, but it's probably the same as everything, you know. But with EQ, it's just, because it's such a musical tool, you can do so much with it when somebody sends you something. Obviously, like you can listen to a final mix or something that's coming into you, or even an early stage demo, and say, right, well, I can't really EQ this out. But if you've got a very well, like this record, you've got a very well produced, well written track, and it's been mixed well, and they kind of just want to put that final polish on it, you can do a lot outside of the, let's say, I don't even know what you describe as a standard mastering gig, but, you know, just, there's a lot of information out there, you know, it says, you know, you should only be doing, you know, 0.5 dB to 2.5 dB cuts and bits. And like, I mean, I can't remember the last time I've done that, but you know, that sort of thing, just to kind of push it a bit further. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But a tool like that is so helpful because it just opens everything up way more. You can do some standard EQ at the start, and then sort of use a tool like that to see if, all right, can I make this wider? Can I work on the middle a bit more? And
so when you did the widening thing, I got a little confused because you talked about how the widening can screw up a master. But did you use the widener on the whole thing, or did you use it just on the distortion that you were blending back in?
No, I used it on the whole thing.
Okay,
yeah.
So it's more about just doing it tastefully and not screwing it up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of our job in general. Don't screw it up.
Don't screw it up.
Well, as far as I kind of took it as far as it could go, and then, you know, when you take wideners too far, and you're like, nah, the whole this is going to fall apart. Yeah. So, and that's another thing that I like to do, kind of with everything. I'm not sure if it's part of your process as well, but just push even something as simple as when you're getting your fader balance at the start, push the fader too high and go, well, that's too far, and then take it back.
Yeah, totally.
Because, you know, that's a cool thing to do. It took me ages to figure that out. Like, I'm such a slow learner. Like, it's one of those things of I think when you're first getting going, you have a bit of apprehension about that, right? That you might break something or overload something,
or that it's not allowed, or you're like, you have to be incredibly subtle, and And then you're quicker to doubt yourself than you are to doubt that you just didn't do a damn thing yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I started in this really with this stuff. I started in the studio in college, and we had a mix of analog gear and like really basic computers. So we didn't even get to touch Pro Tools at the start. We were recording to ADAT, which is like,
oh yeah,
that sort of, it's like middle ground stuff, really, isn't it? And like, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. It's not, it's definitely not tape, and it's not computers. It's just this weird sort of gray area of time where we recorded to ADAT.
I'm not afraid, man. I'll go do it.
Oh man,
we were ADAT with a Mackie board. I'd you know what? I'd happily go back and make another record on ADAT and a Mackie board just because we'd probably go now and be like, oh, this is cool. You can do this, or you can do that. I don't need any top end or bass.
Yeah, we had a big audience desk, and we'd record through that. There's a very small amount of outboard gear, and then into ADAT. And I think the only thing we could do in our initial assignments was just do some stuff on the 2-track at the end, and that was like, what was the name of the old Sony? Was it called like Sound something? Was it called SoundForge or something like that? Was
right?
The name
Yeah,
of the program?
Sony SoundForge. Yeah, I did one.
Yeah.
I did a session or two on that, and it was difficult.
Man, I got going on what was it called? I was on Cool Edit Pro.
Where that was too.
Yeah, that was cool. That was Adobe Audition way back in the day.
Yeah, we had Cool Edit Pro, but we didn't have. But it was just 2-track. We didn't have multi-track going, and not only that, but our only sound card was an AES digital input card to a PC. So I would record stuff on my DAT machine, then I'd come over and transfer it into the computer, do some edits, and put something back together, and then transfer it back to a DAT tape, and then transfer that back over to a ADAT.
It's just so crazy how much it's changed, because like when I was in college, like ADAT was passé, but they wanted us to have that level of like, I think they just did it to us to torture us. I mean that obviously humorously, but like
they were still pissed that they had to go through the ADAT chapter, right? The teachers.
Yeah, Pro Tools was on the studio computer, obviously, but the great part about that studio is that you had so many students passing through it, and they would never put it back the same way.
Yeah,
and that just teaches you. It's so funny looking back on it, how much we all complained about going into the studio and having to like rewire everything, pull it all apart, and try and get just some sort of signal flow going on. But like that's, unless you're running your own studio all the time and you have it, even if you have it set up exactly the way you want it all the time, you're gonna have to do some sort of troubleshooting going into somebody else's studio at some stage.
To be quite honest, it's almost a bit of a weak link when you get your own studio and you leave it set up, because I think we probably can all acknowledge this. At the point at which something has just worked for a while, then it just makes sense that our brain would be like, okay, I don't have to hold on to the how did I do that thing anymore. I can let that go because I'm going to focus on this other stuff. And then the day that it stops working, you're like, oh crap, I don't know what to do to fix this, So it's almost better if you are always having to set things up, because then you hold on to all that information, and it's like before cell phones and contact lists, you just have to memorize all the phone numbers, and your brain had no problem doing that,
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, the way, even if you're in somebody else's studio, and like this has definitely happened to me, and I'm happy to admit it, where you can't quite figure out what's going on, and you've done everything right, and then like you'll call them and they'll be in another room or whatever. They'll come in, they'll push one button, or they'll click a setting, and everything just works, and you're like, oh, I'm such an idiot.
The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is the fastest, toughest, mini-sized, universal, portable USB-C SSD that lets you record from anywhere in the galaxy with confidence. With speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second real-world performance, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron gives you high-speed audio data for recording and playback. Take your sessions and sample libraries with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Never worry about your storage and the safety of your music again. Find the new OWC Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Eventually, you learn that whatever the problem is in the studio, it's user error. And once you accept that, then you're like, okay, cool. No matter what's going on, I still know that it's my fault. So I'll just keep figuring it out until I figure it out. And I did also learn that through experience that when I would try and explain what was wrong to the assistant, I'd figure it out. So then you learn like, oh, great. The sooner I begin to tell somebody and break down what's wrong with this, I'm just going to figure it out. So I might as well get started on explaining what's wrong.
That's so cool. So yeah, as soon as you start telling somebody else, you figure out the problem. And it that's for me where I really felt like I started to understand what I was doing at like the next level when I started to teach. Because when you want to share your information with somebody else, you have to, well, if you care, you have to make sure that you're giving that person the best information. Who's to say it's the right information? Because, like we're talking about pushing the fader too high, or, how much you cut or boost, it's all down to taste and it's all down to what works. But like, you give the best education that you can, you really want to make sure you're not giving just misinformation. So that for me is where things really started to, and that's been the same for me in lots of things. I used to teach guitar, and that's, you become an amazing guitarist when you start to like teach people. That's when, because you really, and your students end up catching up with you pretty quick as well. So you have to stay ahead of them. So
you're saying I don't need to take lessons. I just need to start teaching.
Yeah, just start teaching straight away. Don't take any lessons. Yeah. And I mean, that's the other side of it as well, of course. But yeah, it's so important that once you, it's just such a good thing to do for people as well, that if you've got a certain level of knowledge, and if you can, and you have the time, and there's people that are willing to learn, and you're willing to teach, by teaching them and by finding out how they learn and passing on that information, it only makes you better. It only makes you better as an engineer.
Well, let me turn the screws on you right now, and I'll get you to teach us something. How do you like to set up a mix template?
My mix template is, it's actually like, it's a hybrid of, I was talking about Pensado's place earlier. I use some of the template that he used to use. I don't know what his template looks like now, but from back then, which was based on Michael Brower's ABCD sort of setup, where he has his 4 buses, which is just like, when you read his articles, it's just like, wow, it's a different level when you go into, anyway, it's just crazy. So it's sort of loosely based on that. But what I have in my setup all the time is, right on the top, I've got my mixing reference set, which is like 20 seconds excerpts of songs that I love, or that just work, or I want a low end from this, or this is my mid-range sort of test, or this is my high end, or my vocals, this is a very loud vocal, or this is a vocal that I love. I have that right up the top all the time in every session, so I can pull out I can pull the track onto a new stereo track, drag out the handles, and I've got the whole thing. Or maybe I just want to listen to that and that, or listen to that one section, so I can mix and match between there and my mix. And it's also obviously so helpful if you're in another room, if you're in another studio.
Let me back you up and see if it gets you to re-explain that, because I'm not sure if I followed fully. But you've got a template that might have a variety of different tracks. Like you might have a whole series of tracks that do different styles of vocal, like one that's super loud vocal, one that's something else.
Yep.
And you're dragging up the vocal and saying, let me see what it sounds like on the super loud version. You just drop the audio on there.
So yeah, these are all up the top, and these are chart songs. These are or songs that I just love that are just I've got 20 seconds of each just crossfade.
Oh, these are your reference tracks.
Reference sets, yeah.
Okay,
The reference
I got you.
reference set up
Okay.
top.
I got you.
Yeah, I probably explained that terribly. So
no, that's all right. Now I understand what you mean. So you've got a variety of reference tracks ready to go that will remind you what a super loud vocal sounds like, what
exactly
a ballad sounds like, or whatever.
Yeah,
cool,
yeah.
Cool.
So that's always up to the top of my session, no matter where I go. Ever since I started using this, it's just always there. So helpful for wherever I am, whatever environment I am, because I've heard it in so many rooms and spaces that it helps to tune my ears kind of very, very quickly.
And it's just like a stereo track, and then each song is a playlist or something like that if you're in Pro Tools?
I have 20 seconds of each song just like crossfaded into each other, just so I have it's like a set that just runs from start to end.
Cool.
I got that originally. It's not my original thing. Like what is original anymore? But it's from Ro Iyazaki's. I've probably totally butchered his name, and I'm really sorry. But his, I think his book's just called Mixing Audio, and it teaches you how to do this. It's really, really good. Below that, then I'll have my sort of song-specific references, which would be, if I'm speaking with an artist and they've mentioned, I really love how this sounds, or, I'd love the mix to sound this way, I'll have that in there. I'll have a couple of those if I can, so that if my own references aren't getting me there, I'll use those as the main references, but if my own references aren't getting me there in terms of the kick or the snare or whatever, I'll go in and I'll exactly sort of listen to those and go, well, this is what he or she has in mind for how they want this to sound. So this is great. And then always the rough mix on the top as well. So what if they have sent me a rough mix, which I always try and get that's in there too. So I can that's all my reference material just right up the top. So that's going to keep me on track when things start to get a bit weird. Now that's for mixing.
As they always do, rock stars.
Oh yeah, you can be sure. Or if a great thing is, I'm not saying push through it, but if your ears start to get fatigued and you've taken a break and you've come back, and they don't feel weird, you're not hearing things that aren't there or anything like that, it can actually be helpful to listen to your reference set, just to listen to something else. I'm not saying go to the point where you can't hear anything and everything's just a mess like that. That's the time where you just say, I'm finished for the day, or the night, or whatever it is, or the early hours of the morning. But if you've been working on something for quite a while and you actually just need a break from that material, go and give your ears a rest, come back, listen to your reference set or listen to the references, because just by listening to something else, you get a much better idea of when you go back and actually listen to the mix that you're working on, your ears sort of focus on it. It's a strange sort of, it's strange when it happens, but it works. It really, really works when you go and you listen to something else, come back, you can zero in on all the little imperfections in your mix then. Or maybe like you go, oh wow, this whole thing just sounds too muddy. And you can fix it really quickly. So that's why I always have those in there. Yeah. Exactly like you said, when things get weird, you can fix them. I don't have those. I don't have references. If I'm writing or producing, I do not ever have references in a production or writing session or template.
Right, because that's a time you don't want to be influenced, or else it'll, what will it do if you try to have a reference around?
You may end up in court. That's the extreme end of it, but it's just gonna lean you in a certain direction. Like if somebody says, just use that example. If somebody says, I want the kick to kind of sound like this track, or the snare to sound like this track. When you're mixing, that's great, because the source material of the track that you're mixing is totally different to the source material in these records that you're referencing.
Yeah.
But if you have a reference of a track that you really love, and you go out and you start writing, you're gonna write something that sounds like that snare drum, or you'll all of a sudden you'll be setting your BPM to match that BPM, and it's a weird thing, but it's not a good idea. So yeah. I stay away from it.
And that's not the point. He's Rockstar's Steven's not talking about center court at the Celts Lakers playoff game where the Celts won. He's talking about the kind of court you don't want to be in. So right on. All right. I'm going to jump to something else here too. Oh, so, well, still on the mixed template idea, but one of the articles you wrote too was called 2 Steps to a Killer Kick Drum Production. And I figured maybe that ties into the mixed template and getting your kick and low end to sound punchy and all that, if you want to pivot on any of that.
Yeah, for sure. I moved then. The way I have my template set up is, there's various iterations of people talking about top-down mixing, but I actually have my tracks set up that way from top to bottom. So my buses are at the very top. I've got all vocals, all music, all drums, and all effects. And you'll see that in Dave Pensado's templates. And again, going back to that 4-bus idea, I really like that. And then they feed into like a submix fader. And then finally just the print, the print track. So if I want to print my mix at the end. So below the all effects, then I have my effects buses just pre set up that I can kind of hide or activate and hide and unhide when I need. And I don't tend to have my plugins already on them because I find that ties back into what you were saying about just constantly going to the safe thing. And I know that I mentioned I use Kramer Master Tape as my saturation plugin a lot. I do, but if I've got a delay as an example, I might try a different delay plugin, or I might try something different on the delay. But if I have the plugins pre-set up, I'll be like, oh, well, that worked on the last one, so I'll just do it the same way again. And sometimes that can work. Sometimes beneficial, sometimes not. Maybe have a template that has all your plugins already there and bypass, so you just have to activate. But I prefer just kind of having the buses set up and then just adding my plugins in as I go, because sometimes I might want to EQ before I delay, or just using delay as an example, or sometimes I might want to do it after, or maybe you want to compress before you reverb or after, or whatever you want to do. And if you just have the set structure all the time, then you're kind of stifling your creativity without realizing it.
So you're saying that you've got a bus called Slap Delay, but it doesn't have a slap delay on it yet.
Yeah, it doesn't have the plugin on it yet because I might want to use a different one, whatever.
Well, how do you avoid the process of finding the plugin and choosing it and putting it on there? How do you avoid that being a slow and arduous search through the plugin list? Are there any tips to doing that quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're in a hurry, it doesn't take much to just find the one that you use all the time. If you really are in a hurry and you don't want to, you go, well, my intentions were pure. I wanted to start out, maybe use something different. I try and keep my plugin collection. It's sort of crept up over the years, but I try and keep it pretty small, which is, it's hard enough to do because we all just keep buying stuff. But if I've got something new, I'll you'll always try it out. So
yeah.
in that situation of Slap Delay, I'd be like, oh, what does this new plugin do? And I'll try that out. And then you always have in your back pocket of, if it's taking you longer than the set amount of time that you've sort of said, well, this is going to take me this amount of time, or, I've got this much time to get all of my effects in, then you kind of scrap it and go back to what you know already. But yeah, I don't tend to audition too many plugins. I'll try and use something that maybe I've not used before, or at least something that I roughly will know will work, and throw that in. It's common sense really. If I'm under massive time pressure, or which is rare enough, but if something like that is happening, I'll just grab the old faithful one that I use all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess another way to do something similar is you can have, if you've got like 4 delays you might use, you just have all 4 of them on there and they're just all disabled.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You just scoot them around, you shuffle them or whatever. I do wish Pro Tools shuffled plugins. They're not there yet, but I wish you could just, if there was something already in slot 1, you could just drag a compressor or an EQ to the front and it would just shuffle them all out of the way, so you didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, because sometimes like it's rare because the backups are so good, but like you might go and do that and take one out, and then you'll have, I didn't really want to do that, or you might accidentally delete it or change. When you change like a track from stereo to mono and you lose the plug-in settings, and you're like, oh no, and then you forgot what you've done. Like that does happen. So it would be great to just be able to drag stuff around and move stuff. But we'll get there. That's a great tip though, Lidge, what you said about having, like, let's say you've got slap delay and you don't know which one you're going to use, just having a couple of different ones just kind of already preloaded. That's a cool way of avoiding using the same thing over and over again. Maybe have a few there already so that you actually have to go in and like get rid of 3 and pick one, or even just 2.
They're just all disabled. Just enable one, see if you like it, enable a different one, whatever. But another thing, again, the simple solution sometimes is a good one, is like, for example, like Rockstars, don't forget, it's super easy to take a screenshot. It's like, what is it? Shift Command 3 will shoot the whole screen. Shift Command 4 will give you the box where you can draw it. And if you're working on a plugin and you got a thing and you're not sure, or you don't even want to figure out how to save the settings somewhere and worry about all that stuff, just draw a screenshot on it. And then like at least you could go back and grab it if you needed to in a minute,
Yeah, that's great advice. And, I tend not to work from presets with mixing. In the mixing stage, I tend to start everything from scratch. It's probably I feel like I could probably save a lot of time, but I really like to just dial things in as I go rather than, I don't know, there's something about it for me. I prefer just sort of starting with a blank canvas and not just starting with a preset or even somebody else's preset. It's just not my thing, really. I like to just start with, this is how this song sounds. Well, I'm gonna fiddle around with it. I'm gonna work with it from here. Well, I think it's just my own taste.
Well, no, but I mean, I think to back that up, I think I don't mind exploring presets, but when you find something that's cool, but the problem is once you stumble on something that's cool, you immediately don't know which knob to adjust. And that's the difference. When you mentally, you're like, okay, I need a slap. I want it to be 1 echo. I want it to be this long. You're in control of that. So you're adjusting things. So that's my takeaway on it, is like, sometimes I pull up a Sound Toys preset. It's like this crazy thing. I'm like, whoa. And then I'm like, it's not quite it, but I don't have a clue which knob to grab to start adjusting it,
Exactly. And, or even like some of the API, the 500 series modelers, that you might pull up one of them just to even make it simpler, one of those EQs, and you use a preset. But some of the presets can have a lot happening, and then they'll have the gain or the fader on the right just like totally changed to level match, and you kind of have to work backwards then, rather than like you could bring that fader up and try and just kind of figure out what's happened with your EQ, but in that time you could actually just EQ the track yourself.
Right.
So,
well, and so here's the takeaway, Rockstars. If you're using like the CLA vintage compressors series, I forgot what they're called, but the signature compression or whatever, you get the CLA 1176 and stuff like that. One of the challenges is if you pull it up, the default setting, they do a little trick there to try and make you like the plugin, where it's a little bit louder. And so one of the things you can do is you can actually create your own default setting that's 0 level. So you can run a tone through it, flip it in and out of bypass until you've level matched it and it's not compressing, and then save that as the new user default, so that every time you pull up the plugin, at least you're starting by adding the plugin, but it hasn't changed the sound yet, and then you begin to adjust the knobs.
I'm definitely going to do that, because that's the first thing I do with the CLA 76 is I always bring the output down, because it's cranked, but like it's a sales and marketing thing. Yeah, that's cool. I'm going to start doing that.
I mean, it's not a stupid move on their part. It works. No. I mean, just because we know that we like things that are louder doesn't mean that we won't continue to like things that are a little louder.
Yeah, for sure. It depends, really. It all depends on the mix. For a stage, I was making, everything has to be level matched, but it doesn't necessarily have to be level matched. It's just if you've made a few EQ moves and they've compensated for each other in terms of the overall level, you might not need to go in and start level matching. Maybe you just need to listen. Maybe you just need to use your ears. It doesn't always have to be about this new sort of technique or this technique that you have in your mind that's so important.
Yeah, because it can't be complicated.
Yeah, you don't want to overcomplicate it either, and we often do that. So, but once I have those I have those effects sort of set up just loosely as a template, and I have all them hidden so that I'm not taking up real estate in the track. I just have like my references to 4 buses. I always have a pink noise track in the session as well. Whether I use it or not is another thing, but it's quite a handy thing to have. Just if I'm
What for?
If I'm struggling with levels at the start, or just to kind of get a balance at the start, there's I've seen endless people talk about this, and it's whether it's good or whether it's not, or whether it creates, a bad mix or a good mix or whatever. But sometimes if you want, you can solo your pink noise and then individually solo each track, bring up the fader against the pink noise until you can just hear that track, each one as you go, and just sort of get a very rough balance based on the pink noise, because it'll mask the frequencies until you can start to hear the fundamentals come through. So that's it. Like, it's a quick way of getting a balance. And then from there, like if you're in a real hurry, you can do it that way. And then from there, actually just go in and obviously mute the pink noise and start to move things around, pan them and move your faders.
What if you don't mute the pink noise? Just kidding.
You could have a pretty interesting
There's your
record.
distortion. There's your distortion in mixing. Do you want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Do you want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW, so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro-sounding mix that won't take years to learn, the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of creating a great sounding mix, then register for my free course Mix Master Bundle to get great mixes using simple free plugins. And get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR at checkout to get 10% off any course for a limited time. I got to circle us back. We want the 2 steps to a killer kick drum production.
The 2 steps to killer kick drum production. So that video, that's mostly I'm just talking about using 2 plugins, like just using EQ and compression. It's so simple, but a lot of what I do has already kind of happened up the top. So by up the top, I mean on those buses that I just spoke about.
Right.
Stereo bus straight away. I'll always do some work at the start, just to, once I've got the faders balanced and I've got things panned the way I want. Almost always some EQ, some linear phase EQ, just to try and match the tone to the reference a little more, or just where it's needed, or if there's something glaringly obvious that's wrong with the mix, get it done there and then. Same with some compression, saturation if needed, just really basic stuff. And the same on the other buses, on the vocals and on the music and on the drums, whatever can be done straight away, heavy lifting, nothing crazy, just kind of get it done there and then. So when it does come to just getting like a really good kick sound, you've already done a lot of the work up the top. You've already sort of cohesively put together your sound, and your track is already sort of come together in this sort of like macro environment. So when it comes to crafting a kick drum sound, you really just don't need to go crazy. So many of us, I'm guilty of this as well. Like, you can go bananas and just trying to get this like kick to sound a certain way. And oftentimes it's just about, how does your kick sound with your bass? Mm-hmm. How does your kick sound just when you solo your kick and your bass? Are there any frequencies masking each other? Is the fundamental of your kick and the fundamental of your bass the same? Do you maybe need to, or even if it's not the fundamental, do you maybe need to adjust just the level of, the crossover, where, maybe they're both sort of, there's a lot of power at 80 in both of them. One of those needs to win. So a simple EQ can can sort that out for you. Is it more bass driven? Is it more kick driven? You know, what do you need to do? Do you actually need to compress your kick drum, or does it sound okay as it is?
Right.
You know, is it loud and punchy, and is that what you're looking for? Or is there too much attack? Because if there's too much attack, if there's too much beater sound, you know, you can put some compression on there and try and tame that and try and round out the sound. So,
well, and another thing that I think we forget sometimes is compression can also be about leveling out the dynamic, the variation, like a kick that's hitting loud at one point and soft at another. Compression can kind of make that all feel a little more consistent. But if you have a kick that's actually already consistent and sounds right, like a sample might, then yeah, exactly like you said, you might not need to put anything on it at all. Just set the level, and that's what your kick should sound like.
Yeah, if you're yeah, of course, if you're working with sample-based music, a lot of the time,
real good drummer.
Or yeah, which there are plenty of those out there. It's so crazy when you see waveforms and you're looking at it happening in real time. You're like, this is an actual human creating this. Like, what sort of robot are they really? But yeah. So yeah, just to even out the sound, just to make it nice and smooth the whole way through. Like, your compressor can do that for you. I think we really overthink that. Sometimes you can have a kick drum that just doesn't sound right. That just hasn't been recorded. Well, I've worked with plenty of kicks. I've recorded kicks that are not good, and I was the person recording them. And you know, maybe I'll salvage it with the kick in or the kick out, or vice versa, and they're both terrible. So
right,
you got to do something there. You know, maybe it is sample replacement or whatever. But for the most part, if you've got decent source material, you can do so much with having the heavy lifting done already on the buses, just getting a nice balance and a little bit of EQ, just a bit of clever EQ and compression, just to get that balance in the low end. And then how does that? Then you can start really building. You know, how does that relate? If you're starting from your low end, how does that relate to the next drum sound? How does that relate to my snare? And you know, let's get the lead vocal in. Is there anything sort of competing for space? Then obviously don't just listen to everything in solo. Start to listen to the mix as a whole as well. But you know, once you're starting to move, then I think you can do a lot with just those two moves. What's your take on that? Do you think you?
Oh, absolutely. Sort of, I mean, I think I remember one of the first things I learned about kick drums was, you know, the funny thing is the kicks and snares were the opposite. Actually, the first move I learned about snares was the idea of adding 250 hertz range, somewhere in that range, for body of the snare.
Yep.
Or at least that was advice given to me. And then later on, working with a mixer who I really respected, you know, I was like, how did you get our kick to sound so great? And he looked over and, you know, and he had pulled like 12 dB out of, removed it from the 250.
And then you're left scratching your head going, what's real? What's the truth?
Yeah. And well, different instruments, you know, the kick wanted less of it and the snare wanted more. And you know, it's learning that. I think for me, the takeaway was, rather than reaching for boosting the low end of a kick as a first move to try and learn, and then boosting the high end for the beater attack, is start by learning how to remove all the other stuff that you just don't want in there. And I think that the stuff that I don't want in a kick, that I don't like, I think the reason it's there, because it's a fair question to ask ourselves, like, why the hell is it in there in the first place, you know, is probably a lot to do with the fact that when we close mic a kick drum, there's a resonant boxy frequency inside the drum that gets amplified into the microphone. And so we have to, you know, compensate for that by sucking a lot of it out.
That's such a good point as well, in terms of just EQing kick drums in general. I had this, I don't know where I got it from as well. It's a similar sort of thing where somebody says, you know, boost 250 on a snare. Somebody was saying to me, or maybe it's just somewhere I picked it up, that you got to cut between like 3 and 500 on every kick drum, because that's where you'll have boxy frequencies there. That's definitely not always true.
Right.
It can be, for sure, like you just described, but if you're going in and you're doing that on every single like sample that you've got, you pulled something there from Splice and you start cutting 300 to 500 out on every sample, It doesn't make any sense. You're just arbitrarily cutting for no reason, just because of maybe something somebody said to you, or a belief that you sort of once had. That's not necessarily true. And I think even in that video, I think I might boost around that area just to kind of show that, like, actually in this situation, that actually works. It kind of, you don't always need to do it. It is a bit different. I definitely think so when you're recording there and then, and you do get that resonance, and it's bothering you, and you go, well, yeah, obviously I do need to cut that.
Well, and it depends on the music too. That's been a thing for me to learn, is that, like, instead of thinking about like what's the right move for stuff, it's begin to learn that, like, okay, the lower mids on a kick drum, if I subtract those, it helps me create a modern kick drum sound. But if I leave those in, or even boost them slightly, it helps me create something that might feel more like an old school R&B track, or something like that, where you want sort of a pillowy, soft kick drum. And then you begin to understand that we're talking now, instead of worrying about technicalities, we're talking about, aesthetic choices for the production style, and like what are we going for? What's this instrument's role? What's it trying to do?
No, that's gold. Yeah. And that's why people are hiring you as well. They're not hiring you obviously they're hiring you for technical knowledge, but they're also hiring you probably more than you realize for your taste, and the fact that you can complement what they're trying to do. So let's take that example as well. You got somebody coming in, they want to go for like a real vintage, like very cool sound, and you just modernize and polish up the whole thing. They're going to be looking at you like you got 10 heads.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've had people tell me, like, can we hear a little less of the beater, the kick drum? And I'm like, and that was the first time where I was like, wait, we want to hear less of it? And then I do it. And I'm like, wow, these guys were right. They actually knew what they were doing, Pretty cool.
Yeah. And working with more people, just trying to get in on as many sessions. And even if you are just a one-man show, and it's not just a one-man show, it's such an amazing thing to be able to do everything yourself. Collaborating, just doing sessions with other people, even if you're not going to release it, just try and help people out and just get a perspective of what they're doing, because you never know what's going to come across into your own style. Or if you're a mixer, talking with other mixers, the ideas that you get. You literally just gave me that idea about changing the default on the 1176. It's a great idea.
I don't remember. I learned that from somebody originally too. So,
it's none of this information that from me is original either. I mean, everything I know is just kind of borrowed and just stuff that's been passed on to me. And even the things that I've tried, or even the things that I come up with, and I go, oh, that sounds really cool. I'm sure somebody else has done them somewhere along the way. I'm not going to claim originality on.
Well, now you have, of course, you have understandingaudio.com and Rockstars. If you go there, I think you have a pretty cool, some free stuff there, right? That will help out. You got a free guide. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. It ties into what we were talking about there, about, being hired for your taste. And we mentioned references in a bit of detail earlier. It's all about how to use reference mixes in such a way that it actually complements the mix. And in that situation where you're working with an artist that says, hey, I want a kind of a vintage sound that's kind of like this, how to get it. Maybe if they tell you a track that they like, how to use that track to get a great mix and to get a professional mix, not a pristinely polished mix, but maybe the one that they want. Or maybe it is a very pristinely polished pop mix, the artist that you're working with. This guide will help you big time with that, because it'll take you all the way through the process. It'll actually give you examples of tracks that have great vocals in my humble opinion, and great drums, or this is a great reference for delay based on Grammy Award winning mixing engineers, what they've done, just so you can start to listen to it, put the sonics together, start to put your own set together and take it from there. So yeah, if you want it, you can get it at understandingaudio.com. Head over, just click it, the link on the page, and also at getpromixes.com. There's a link to the guide there as well, either or, and it's all yours. When you do download it, at the moment, what I'm doing, which is a bit crazy and probably unsustainable, is that I'm teaching people in the first week, because when you download the guide, you become part of the mailing list. teaching people how to mix in 5 days, trying to teach you how to mix in 5 days, or at least improve upon your mixes. And people
Very
are
cool.
sending me in their mixes as we go, and I'm listening to stuff and trying to give feedback. So I hope I'm still doing that by the time people listen to this. So it's
Right on.
limited time only, perhaps, but it's a great learning experience for me, and it just gets me interacting with, this is all about relationships. It gets me interacting with more people. So
Right
yeah,
on.
if it's helpful for you, download it and apply it.
Awesome. Well, let me jump to our closing question. This one's hypothetical, and we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back and find young Steven, who's like, in a closet going, "Do you guys have any air conditioning in this place?" And you say, and you show up, and you're like, "Listen, young Steven, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Should I try an Irish accent? No, maybe I'll skip that. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?"
Well, I could go with the very obvious joke of get out of the closet.
There you go.
That's a pretty good joke. The best advice, I think, for anybody, especially because the stage of my career that I'm at now, and I'm really grateful for all the experiences that I've had. But at this stage, I'm still focused on songwriting, production, music, making the best music that I possibly can, and helping people make the best music that they possibly can. Is that if you have a plan and if you have a goal and an outcome in mind, is never let go of that. No matter what stage of life you're at, doesn't matter what age you are, but especially for younger people listening, that it is really important to never let go of it, because it is possible. Anything is possible when you get your mind to it. And if you have a plan, somebody else is not going to make a plan for you, because plenty of people will make plans for you if you don't stick to your own.
That is so true. That's a tough lesson to finally learn.
Man, it's a big one. And you can look at my career. I'm very grateful for everything that I've done, but along the way, there have been certain things that I've done that somebody looked at and said, this guy could be great doing this. Very grateful for the opportunities. But when you refocus yourself and you get closer to your own purpose, you say, well, no, actually, this is more me. And you can move in a certain way once you're aligned, I mean, Lidge, I'm sure you can speak to that as well.
I mean, I love working on stuff that I give a shit about. That's a good way to put it, right? Music that turns me on is the music I want to work on.
Absolutely.
Gets me excited.
And the beauty and the joy in just finding people that you can help and that you want to work with is, you're never going to hold back on your resources when you find those people and you really want to help them. And, obviously everybody has to get paid, but there are projects and there are things that you will do that you will give way more than you would ever give, and way more time than is measurable against your rate, because you care so much. And that's when you're in the right place.
Right on, man. Well, so thank you for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. What an awesome pleasure to meet you, hang out with you across the big pond there. Let the rock stars know where they can go find you online. Where should they reach out to check out your stuff? What if they just need to mix their next hit record with you?
Well, they're welcome. The best place probably to get in touch with, where you have instant interaction, is on Instagram. I'm using it more and more. I've come out of the dark ages and I'm using social media. So that's at I'm Steven M. Kelly. I am Steven, Stephen, M initial Kelly, Kelly. That's the best place to get me, because From there I can direct people to wherever they need to go.
And then, of course, remember to go to understandingaudio.com, Rockstars, and you can get your free guide and start using reference tracks in a really, really effective way, and get your mixing figured out in 5 days. That sounds groovy. And then let's see, what else was I going to say? And then, of course, remember, we've got a playlist of the music that you've sent us in the show notes, so go check that out as well. And dude, it's great to meet you, man. I look forward to seeing you in person.
Yeah, Liz, thanks so much for your time. Looking forward to seeing you in person too.
Yeah, thank you from me and from all the rock stars for giving us so much of your time today. It was awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right, man. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who have helped make this episode possible. OWC, Atom Audio, Spectra 1964, Isotope, and JZ Microphones. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to get access to lots of plugins, and Rockstars at JZmic.com for 50% off select vintage series mics for a limited time. And remember to visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for free interviews and masterclasses, and use the coupon code ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in the description of this podcast. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.